The city of Etherian floated among the stars, a jewel of light and shadow. Its towers reached high into the velvet night, glimmering with neon veins that pulsed like the heartbeat of a living being. In the distance, the twin moons cast pale silver beams, tracing the edges of domed spires and casting long, trembling shadows across the cobblestone streets below. No one had seen Kale for years. Stories of his survival from the distant war front were whispered in the corridors of the palace. Some believed him dead. Others claimed he had returned changed, broken, or perhaps cursed. Yet here he was, standing at the outer gates of the capital city, his armor battered, darkened by battle, and faintly humming with residual energy from distant worlds. Kale's boots echoed against the marble as he entered the palace. The guards, loyal and cautious, lowered their spears but did not speak. They recognized the shape of his armor even if they feared what lay beneath it. Years of stories had not captured the weight he carried. At the heart of the palace, Queen Celara awaited. She sat upon the throne, tall and poised, her silver hair cascading over shoulders draped in velvet. Her eyes, a pale violet, had always been sharp, discerning, and unyielding. But today, they flickered with a trace of something she had never allowed herself to feel in public: anticipation, mingled with fear. When Kale finally stepped into the throne room, he moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a man who had seen too much, who had survived more than anyone should. His presence filled the room like a storm. The queen rose, her lips pressed in a thin line, her eyes scanning every inch of his armored form. The air was thick with unspoken words. Kale removed his gauntlets first, his fingers scarred and calloused, each line a map of distant battles. "Kale," Celara said softly, her voice almost swallowed by the vast hall. "I am here, your majesty," Kale replied, bowing slightly, though his armor made it awkward. The sound of metal plates rubbing together was a harsh contrast to the softness of his voice, a reminder of the world he had returned from. He unfastened the clasps across his chest slowly, methodically, as if the act itself demanded ceremony. The room seemed to shrink around them. When he finally removed his breastplate, the sight of his body made Celara freeze. The scars were more than flesh and shadow, they were stories carved into his skin. Jagged lines crisscrossed his arms, torso, and shoulders, pale against the darker undertones of battle-tanned skin. They spoke of fire and metal, of blood spilled and enemies defeated, of nights that had no dawn. For the first time, the queen faltered. Her hand, resting lightly on the arm of her throne, twitched. Kale's eyes met hers, calm and unwavering, though beneath the surface there was a storm of weariness and unspoken emotion. "You survived," she whispered. "I did," Kale said, voice steady but low. "Barely." Hero, savior, ghost, never this, the raw truth of a man forged in fire and sorrow. He stepped closer, and the faint hum from his armor seemed to settle into a silence, leaving only the sound of their breathing. Every movement Kale made drew her attention, and yet 1,000 questions hung between them like fragile glass. "You carry more than wounds," she said, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "You carry memories that should not be yours alone." She wanted to reach out to touch the scars, to ask the questions he could not answer. But she stayed rooted, both by protocol and by a fear she did not understand. In that charged silence, the hall seemed to pulse with memories of past campaigns. The screams of battlefields on distant moons, the glimmer of alien suns over endless deserts, and the lonely nights under foreign stars. Kale had walked through worlds of fire and shadow, and every mark on his body was proof of a survival story untold. "Sit with me," Celara finally said, her voice firmer, reclaiming the composure she had worn like armor for decades. "Tell me what happened, everything." He did not speak immediately. The hum of his armor subsided, leaving only a quiet tension. "The war," he began, "was unlike anything we expected. Not just enemies of flesh, but enemies of mind and machine. I have seen cities crumble to dust under forces no one understood, and I have carried men from worlds where the sun had no name." Though the tales were brutal, she did not see the hardened warrior she had imagined. She saw the man behind the scars, a man who had survived the impossible and returned, still breathing, still human. "I feared you were gone," she said quietly. "I feared the stories were true. I wondered if the throne could survive without you, if the city could hold its breath while I wandered the void." The city's alarms were distant, almost like whispers of warning carried on artificial wind. Kale stiffened, his eyes narrowing. He had learned to listen to these signs, to trust the subtle tremors that told him danger was near. Celara noticed the change in his posture, the shift from vulnerable man to alert warrior. "What is it?" she asked. The fleet, Cale said quietly, almost to himself. They've returned. He moved to a large window that overlooked the floating city, the neon streets below stretching into infinity. The stars beyond were clear and cold, and in their light faint shadows moved, the outlines of the returning fleet unmistakable. Solara approached him, her steps careful, her hand reaching out but not touching. What do we do? She asked. Cale did not turn immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the horizon. We prepare, he said, but not just with weapons, with truth, with understanding. I will not let the city fall again, and I will not let what I have carried alone destroy what you protect. Cale flinched, not from pain, but from the memory of battles where no comfort had been allowed. Yet he did not pull away. For a moment the distance between them narrowed, and she glimpsed the man beneath the scars, a man capable of both destruction and profound tenderness. Then we face it together, she said, her voice steadier now, the command in her words blending with the vulnerability in her eyes. Cale finally turned, meeting her gaze fully. The scars, the history, the battles, they were all visible now, but so was the man she had once known, or perhaps the man she had never truly known. The distant rumble of the city's warning system grew louder. Cale's hand hovered near the hilt of a weapon that hung at his side, though he did not draw it. The battle ahead would be fought with more than steel. It would be fought with courage, with trust, with choices that could shape both their fates. Solara stepped closer, close enough that their shoulders brushed lightly. You are not the same man who left, she said softly, almost a confession. And you are not the same queen who waited, Cale replied, voice low but certain. We are changed. We carry different burdens, but perhaps that makes us stronger. As the first signals of the enemy fleet glinted on the horizon, Cale and Solara stood together, their fates intertwined. The scars he bore were no longer just reminders of the past. They were keys to survival, bridges to trust, and silent confessions of the man who had returned to the city, to the queen, to himself. And as the alarm bells rang through the palace, a new chapter began. Not just of war, but of connection, of shared strength, and of the slow, cautious opening of hearts long guarded by duty and pain. The war was returning, but so was the possibility of something more, something neither of them had dared to name. The city waited. The stars waited. And in the quiet moments between breath and shadow, a warrior and a queen faced each other, knowing that everything they had endured had led to this single, fragile instant of the city of Etherian trembled under the approaching fleet. High above, in the palace that floated like a crown among the stars, Queen Solara stood at a panoramic window, her hands pressed against the cool glass. The neon glow of the streets below shimmered like liquid starlight, but tonight the beauty of the city did nothing to calm her. Every pulse of light seemed a warning, a reminder of the fragility of their world. Cale stood behind her, silent and steady. His scars, still visible where the armor had been removed, seemed to hum faintly in resonance with the distant threat. He had been a warrior of countless battles, but the weight of this moment, the stakes for the city and for Solara, pressed upon him in a way no campaign had ever done. They are closer than we expected, he said softly, his eyes tracing the horizon where faint silhouettes of ships drifted in the black void. Not just ships, Solara. This fleet carries weapons that can burn the very air of Etherian. The city was built to survive threats like this. And the heart of the city, of my people. The city could stand without him, yes. But could she? Could she face what was coming without his counsel, his courage, his understanding of what darkness could truly do? The room shifted with the soft hum of energy from the palace core, and Cale's hand brushed against hers accidentally, or perhaps deliberately. Neither spoke, but the touch was enough to remind them both of the years that had passed, the distance that war had imposed, and the fragile bond that had never truly broken. Solara's hand hovered near his, trembling slightly before she withdrew it. We cannot waste time with hesitation, she said, her voice regaining its command. The council waits in the chamber below. They will want plans, strategies, answers. The counselors, ministers, and generals were already assembled, their faces a mixture of awe, fear, and suspicion. Whispers rippled through the room as Cale entered, and he felt their eyes like needles upon his back. He had expected this. He had always expected the world to judge him, not understand him. But the queen's presence beside him steadied him. She was not just a ruler, she was the reason he had returned. And in this moment her trust, implicit and silent, became his shield. The council chamber fell silent as he approached. Cale stopped in front of the main table, bowing slightly in respect before straightening. I have returned, he said, his voice carrying across the hall, and I bring not only my strength but my knowledge of what awaits us. The enemy fleet is larger than anyone anticipated, and their weapons are unlike any we have faced. This is not merely a fight of ships and soldiers. It is a fight of mind, will, and courage. Kale speaks truth, she said, her voice resonant and commanding. We will not face this blindly. We will prepare, but we will also listen. Every insight he brings is the difference between survival and ruin. The scars you bear, do they mark you as savior or as the harbinger of disaster? They speak of what I have endured, yes, but also what I have learned. Those lessons are now for the city, for its people, for survival. Hours passed in the chamber. Strategies were debated, ships deployed, and defenses reinforced. Kale moved with precision, guiding plans with knowledge only a warrior who had survived unimaginable trials could possess. Solara observed him, fascinated not only by his intellect, but by the subtle way he seemed to sense danger before it appeared, to read people, to understand both threats and vulnerabilities. And then, when the council dispersed, the queen summoned Kale to the private chamber above. The chamber overlooked the city, the horizon visible in the starlight, and was quiet save for the hum of protective wards and the faint ticking of energy monitors. You have changed, Solara said, her voice softer than before, almost a whisper. I have, Kale replied. War leaves marks you cannot hide, and yet it also shows you what is worth protecting. You, the city. What we have here. Not understanding, but trust. And even the coldest queens need someone to remind them of their humanity. In that space, the threat outside, the fleet, the war, it all faded for a heartbeat, leaving only the resonance between them. But the city would not wait. A sudden vibration ran through the chamber, stronger than before. Alarms echoed faintly, warning of incoming vessels breaking through the outer perimeter. Kale stiffened, instincts sharpening. He did not need to see the fleet to know their approach was closer, faster, and deadlier than expected. Solara moved beside him, her hand brushing his arm again, not as a queen to a soldier, but as a person to another, sharing the weight of an impending storm. Are we ready? She asked, her voice steady despite the tension. Kale nodded slowly. Ready as we will ever be. But this is only the beginning. We cannot fight them as we have before, not with weapons alone. We must fight with knowledge, with strategy, and with courage neither of us has fully tested. Together, he echoed, and for a fleeting moment, it was as if the weight of years, battles, and survival had lifted, replaced by a fragile, vital hope. Outside the window, the first signs of the fleet's advance became unmistakable. Shadows of massive ships drifted against the neon-lit city, their engines glowing faintly red, ominous and relentless. The city trembled under their presence, a fragile jewel at the edge of a dark horizon. Kale and Solara stood side by side, two figures poised between the weight of history and the uncertainty of what was to come. They were no longer simply warrior and queen. They were survivors, scarred and changed, bound by a connection forged in distance, time, and shared purpose. And as the first warning lights blared across the palace towers, a silent promise passed between them. They would face the storm, the shadows, and the truth of the enemy together. Not because it was duty, but because they had no choice, and perhaps because they had finally learned to trust each other with the scars they carried. The city braced. The stars waited. And the war-branded warrior and the queen stood ready, knowing that the coming night would test not just their strength, but the bond that had survived years of absence, battle, and unspoken longing. The city of Etherian trembled beneath the first assault. The enemy fleet, vast and unyielding, had broken through the outer defenses, sending shockwaves that rattled the floating towers. Neon lights flickered in the streets below, casting fractured patterns across the walls of the palace, as though the city itself were wincing at the threat. Inside the royal chambers, Queen Solara stood before a massive map of the stars, her fingers tracing the paths of incoming ships. Her violet eyes glimmered with determination, but the tension in her jaw betrayed the fear she refused to voice. Kale moved silently beside her, his presence steadying, yet the faint hum of energy through his body suggested something more than mere fatigue. His scars, long hidden beneath armor, seemed to pulse faintly, as if resonating with the approaching danger. The fleet is only the beginning, Kale said quietly, not taking his eyes off the map. There is something beneath this attack, something older than the war we know, a force that waits, that watches. Machines that seemed alive, ancient technologies that carried curses of their own. Some of them bonded with me, I did not know until now that one has awakened. My scars are not only wounds of battle, they are markers of resonance of a curse I did not fully understand. And now it is reacting to the enemy fleet. Something has stirred and it seeks to be complete. But the idea that Kale himself carried a hidden force, a danger entwined with his very flesh, unsettled her in ways that no fleet of ships could. "You must control it," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling inside. "If you cannot, if it takes hold, it could destroy everything we fight to protect. The resonance is tied to my very life. I will not hide it, but I cannot predict its behavior. Not even I can fully control it." "Then we move," she said, and her hand brushed Kale's arm briefly, a silent acknowledgement that he would be by her side through what was to come. They departed the palace, leaving the safety of the inner chambers. The city stretched below them, alive with panic neon lights fractured by smoke and fire. Kale's armor had been removed, but the energy coursing through his body seemed enough to form an invisible shield, his every movement radiating caution and readiness. They arrived at the northern district, a once thriving neighborhood now scarred by explosions and panic. Machines from the fleet hovered above, their weapons casting red glows on shattered buildings. Civilians scattered, terror on their faces. Kale knelt beside a group of trapped people, his hands moving with practiced precision to lift debris to guide them to safety. Solara assisted where she could, her calm voice directing those who panicked, her command steady even as her heart raced. "Your scars," a young soldier whispered, staring at Kale's arms. "They glow." A faint silver light pulsed along the lines of his wounds. It was subtle yet unmistakable, a rhythm that matched the pulse of fear and energy around them. "It is reacting," he muttered. "It senses the technology around us, the weapons, the curse, it seeks resonance. I do not know, but I will not allow it to harm anyone, not while I breathe." As they worked, the ground trembled beneath them. Buildings shuddered, and from the horizon rose a strange, glowing tower carried by the fleet. It was unlike any weapon Kale had encountered. Organic and mechanical, it pulsed with energy that seemed alive, resonating in harmony with the light along his scars. Solara took a step back. "What is that?" she whispered. Kale's eyes darkened. "That is the source. Whatever is bonded to me is reacting to it. If it completes its cycle, it could consume everything." She met it without hesitation. "We face it," she said, determination firming her tone. "Together." Kale gritted his teeth, controlling the power that threatened to surge beyond his command. "Stay close," he warned. "If I lose control, you must protect yourself." The closer they approached, the more the resonance pulsed, the scars along Kale's arms and chest glowing brighter. The energy was intense, like electricity fused with life itself. He could feel it moving through him, sensing the tower, the fleet, and the city. The connection was terrifying and intimate all at once. Solara watched him, the man she had once known and the man he had become merging into a single presence, scarred, dangerous, and yet profoundly human. "Kale," she said softly, "you do not have to carry this alone." But now, perhaps not alone. Kale nodded, drawing a deep breath. "Together," he said, and for a moment the chaos around them faded, leaving only the bond between them, fragile yet unbreakable. The tower pulsed again, and from its core emerged a shape, a shadowy figure, mechanical yet alive, radiating a force that made the very air tremble. Kale recognized it instantly, the heart of the ancient weapon, the entity that had haunted his campaigns, now awakened and drawn to his resonance. Solara stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "We can do this," she said. "You do not fight alone." The city trembled, fires casting flickering light across shattered streets, but Kale's scars pulsed in response, not with fear, but with control. The curse within him resonated with the ancient weapon, a dangerous harmony that neither fully understood, yet neither could ignore. The shadow advanced, and Kale prepared to confront it, knowing that this battle would test everything he had endured. His strength, his control, his very humanity. Solara stood at his side not merely as a queen, but as someone who understood, who trusted, who shared in the burden. The resonance surged, the city's neon glow reflecting in Kale's eyes. Solara met his gaze, and in that moment words were unnecessary. They were ready. Together. The first clash echoed across the northern district, a collision of flesh, metal, and energy, and the battle for Etherian, and for the bond between warrior and queen, had truly begun. The city of Etherian shuddered under the assault of the enemy fleet. Fires burned along the floating streets, reflected in the shattered windows of towers that had stood for centuries. Smoke curled into the sky, mingling with the stars, and the once perfect neon glow of the city flickered, fractured by chaos. Inside the palace, Queen Celara stood on the balcony, her eyes scanning the horizon. Ships moved in coordinated precision, red engines cutting through the night like blood through water. Her hand rested lightly on the railing, steadying herself, yet inside, her heart raced. She had faced crises before, but nothing like this, nothing that threatened both the city she ruled and the man she had come to trust more than anyone else. Kale stood beside her, his scarred arms crossed, energy humming faintly beneath his skin. The resonance within him pulsed, echoing the strange and dangerous machinery of the enemy's fleet. Each pulse was a reminder that the threat was not merely external. It had entwined itself with him, with their lives, and with the fragile bond they had begun to trust. "They have breached the outer defenses," Kale said, his voice low but firm. "The northern districts are in chaos. Some of the city's wards have failed. This is bigger than we anticipated. But the enemy is not just using weapons, they are using fear, division. Shadows within the court are already moving, questioning our leadership, our choices. Others believe the city should abandon strategy for brute force. Neither will serve us. Together..." Kale's scars glimmered faintly under the artificial starlight, a subtle reminder of the reality behind the plans, the cost of survival. Celara spoke first, her voice cutting through the noise. "Silence! We face a threat unlike any before, not just ships, not just weapons, but something older, something that moves with a mind and a purpose we do not yet fully understand. And we will face it together, with knowledge, courage, and unity. They are proof of survival, of battles fought and lessons learned. The resonance within me, yes, it is powerful, dangerous even, but it can be controlled. It can be used, not as a curse, but as a tool to protect this city and its people." The room held its breath as she spoke again. "We will not let fear dictate our actions," Celara said firmly. "Kale has returned not as a harbinger of doom, but as a shield. We must act with strategy, with understanding, and with the courage that has kept Etherian alive for centuries." Maps were spread across tables, holographic projections outlining fleet positions, energy shields, and evacuation routes. The northern districts required immediate reinforcement, while the city's central power grid needed protection from interference by the enemy's resonance-link technology. Kale moved through the room with precision, his experience and instincts guiding the council. He directed ships, suggested deployment strategies, and advised on areas where the resonance within him could interact with the enemy's machines, turning what was a curse into a potential advantage. Celara observed him, admiration and concern mingling in her gaze. He was more than a warrior, he was a strategist, a leader in his own right. And yet beneath the strength, she saw the weight he carried, the fatigue etched into his features, the tension in his movements, and the faint glow of his scars responding to the distant threat. Hours passed. Orders were given, defenses reinforced, and soldiers deployed with Kale and Celara leading from the front. Despite the chaos outside, there were moments of calm within the palace, fleeting seconds where the two could exchange a glance, a word, or a silent understanding. In those moments, the bond between them deepened, not through touch or ceremony, but through shared purpose and trust. As night stretched across the city, the first wave of enemy ships breached the outer shields. Explosions rocked the floating streets, fires casting long, flickering shadows. Kale's scars flared in response, a faint pulse that seemed to synchronize with the energy of the enemy's machines. He gritted his teeth, channeling the resonance to protect nearby civilians, directing energy to reinforce shields and mitigate destruction. Celara moved alongside him, issuing orders, coordinating evacuation, and keeping morale high. Her presence was a stabilizing force, a reminder to both the council and the people that leadership was not just authority, but courage in action. Amid the chaos, Kale felt a surge in the resonance, stronger, more insistent. The ancient weapon, awakened and drawn to him, was responding. He gritted his teeth, fighting to maintain control. Every pulse threatened to overwhelm him, yet he drew strength from Celara's proximity, from her trust, and from the knowledge that they faced this together. A sudden explosion rocked the northern district, throwing debris into the streets. Kale reacted instantly, moving to shield civilians and redirect energy from the resonance to stabilize a collapsing building. Celara followed, helping guide people to safety, her calm voice cutting through the panic. When the dust settled, they found themselves standing amidst the rubble, their breathing heavy, yet unbroken. Kale's scars pulsed faintly, a reminder of the power within him that had kept destruction at bay. Solara looked at him, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. "You are stronger than you realize," she said softly. Kale met her gaze, a flicker of vulnerability passing through his eyes. "And you," he replied quietly, "are stronger than anyone I have ever known. Even in the face of this chaos, you remain steady. You carry the weight of this city and its people with grace and courage." His body trembled and energy flared along his scars, bright and dangerous. Solara grabbed his hand, steadying him. "Focus, Kale," she said firmly. "We can handle this together." Shields flared, energy barriers activated, and the incoming strike was diverted, crashing harmlessly into the outer sectors. The city groaned under the impact, but the palace remained intact. The council looked on in awe, some finally recognizing the power and necessity of the bond between the warrior and the queen. Yet Kale knew this was only temporary. The ancient weapon was still out there, its true nature and power unknown, and the resonance within him, if left unchecked, could be both a salvation and a threat. Solara's hand rested lightly on his shoulder. "We are not alone," she said. "Not now, not ever. You do not have to bear this burden by yourself." "I will not," he whispered, "not while you stand with me. Every district, every ship, every soldier, we will not falter." Yet within the palace, a flicker of hope remained, a hope built on trust, courage, and the understanding that even the deepest scars could become a source of strength. Outside, the city braced. The stars above watched silently. And within the palace, the warrior and the queen stood side by side, ready to face the coming storm. The city of Etherian lay in shattered beauty beneath the twin moons. Fires still burned in pockets of the floating streets, and the neon glow flickered unevenly across towers scarred by the relentless assault. The once pristine city now carried the marks of battle, yet it stood, proud and defiant, like the hearts of those who defended it. At the palace balcony, Queen Solara surveyed the horizon. The enemy fleet, diminished but still formidable, hovered like shadows against the starlit sky. And there, at the center of their formation, pulsed the source of the threat. The ancient weapon, alive and resonating with energy that mirrored the strange pulse along Kale's scars. Kale stood beside her, scarred arms crossed, the faint glow of his wounds reflecting the pale light of the moons. He had fought countless battles, faced death and darkness beyond imagination, yet this moment pressed upon him in a way nothing else had. The weapon before them was not only vast in power, but intimately tied to him, to the resonance that coursed through his body. "It seeks me," Kale said quietly, voice tight but steady. "Not the city, not you, me. It wants to complete itself through my resonance. If I fail to control it, everything falls." A pulse of light, bright and violent, struck the central towers, and Kale's body reacted instantly. His scars flared, silver and blue threads of energy radiating outward, connecting with the weapon in a dangerous harmony. Pain shot through him, but he controlled it, focusing on the rhythm, the resonance, the flow between his body and the threat. Solara's eyes never left him. "You can do this," she whispered. "I am with you always." He stepped onto the palace terrace, closer to the city's edge, where the weapon's influence was strongest. Its energy pulsed like a heartbeat, resonating with every scar, every mark of survival etched into his flesh. Kale raised his hands, letting the energy flow, feeling the rhythm of the weapon in perfect opposition to his own. Solara followed, placing a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Remember, Kale," she said, "control it, not fight it. It is part of you, not against you." Pain and power coexisted in a delicate balance, and Kale felt the ancient weapon react, its pulse slowing, syncing with his own rhythm. The city seemed to hold its breath. Every light, every tower, every citizen waiting, watched silently as the warrior and the queen faced the force that threatened to consume all. Kale's eyes snapped open. The energy surged, but this time it was controlled, directed by his will. With a deep exhale, he pushed the resonance outward, enveloping the weapon in a field of harmonized energy. Sparks of light danced across the skies, reflecting in the waters beneath the floating city, illuminating towers and streets alike. Solara's hand never left his arm. "You are stronger than even I imagined," she said softly, "and braver." The city's damaged towers stabilized, fires dimming as the pulse of Kale's resonance shielded the structures. A final surge of energy rippled through Kale, and he stumbled slightly. Solara caught him immediately, her hand steadying him. He looked at her, exhausted but resolute. "It's done," he whispered, voice raw. "The weapon neutralized. Controlled." Distant fires were extinguished. lights stabilized, and the people of Ithurian, though weary and shaken, emerged from hiding to witness the dawn of survival. Ships in the enemy fleet retreated, their energy dissipating, the shadow of the ancient weapon neutralized by the harmony Kale had imposed. Celara and Kale descended to the palace courtyard, where soldiers and citizens alike watched with awe. The scars along Kale's arms glowed faintly still, a testament to the battle he had endured and the power he had mastered. But in that glow there was no fear, only proof of survival, courage, and transformation. A young soldier approached Kale, eyes wide with admiration. I have never seen anything like that," he said. You saved the city." The bond between them, forged in absence, battle, and unspoken longing, was now evident to all. She raised her voice so the people could hear. "The city stands because we stand together. Every scar, every trial, every choice we made, it led us here. And we will endure, stronger than before." Hope, fragile yet persistent, returned to the hearts of the people. The city, though battered, glimmered in defiance, a reflection of the resilience of its leaders and its citizens. Later, as the sun rose, painting the sky with streaks of gold and violet, Kale and Celara stood on the palace balcony, overlooking the city they had protected. Silence hung between them, not empty but full of understanding, relief, and a fragile joy. Celara's hand found his again. "Your scars," she said softly, tracing the faint lines on his arms. "They are no longer just marks of pain. They are proof of everything you endured and overcame. You are not broken, Kale. You are remarkable." "I have carried them for years," he admitted. "But it was never enough. I never knew they could mean something more until now, until you." "And perhaps that is enough." The city below began to hum with life again, citizens returning to rebuild, to care for one another, to take tentative steps toward normalcy. The floating towers, though scarred, reflected the first light of day, glimmering like stars brought to earth. Celara and Kale remained on the balcony, their hands entwined, looking toward a horizon filled with uncertainty, but also possibility. They had faced shadows, both external and within themselves. They had confronted fear, pain, and the unknown, and they had survived, not alone, but together. Kale's scars glowed faintly in the morning light, no longer signs of suffering, but of triumph and transformation. Celara leaned closer, resting her head lightly against his shoulder. "The city lives," she whispered. "And so do we." And in the quiet aftermath, the warrior and the queen, scarred, changed, and resolute, stood side by side, ready for whatever dawn would bring. The resonance within Kale pulsed one last time, faint and steady, a reminder that survival was not only a matter of strength, but of connection, trust, and courage. And as the people of the city began to rebuild, Kale and Celara remained on the balcony, a living symbol that even in darkness, hope could endure, and love, in its quiet, steadfast way, could flourish. The stars above twinkled, silent witnesses to the rebirth of the city, the redemption of a warrior, and the bond of two souls who had survived the impossible. And in that moment, everything felt possible. She watched as I took off my armor. The queen froze at the sight of my battle wounds, Sci-Fi Stories.